Hi you guys, today we are going to talk about congruent polygons. Congruent polygons. Polygons means a shape with many sides, okay? Okay. Examples could be a triangle, could be a rectangle, right? 3 sides, 4 sides, pentagon, hexagon. Okay, you guys got it? Okay, so many sides. These are all convex. We are not talking about shapes that are concave. We're not going to do that. They're all going to be convex polygons. So when they're congruent polygons, they have exactly the same shape and size. For instance, rectangle and triangle, they are not congruent. Rectangle and rectangle, they're the same shape, kind of, in that they're a rectangle, but they're not congruent because they're not exactly the same. So these are not congruent polygons. Okay? If I lay one on top of the other, they don't match up perfectly. They have to match up perfectly with each other, and these do not congruent. What if I try a triangle, okay, and then another triangle? These triangles, they appear to be congruent. Let's see, I'm going to flip it over. Could I slide them on top of each other? Are they exactly the same? Dun, dun, dun. Yes, these are exactly the same. These are congruent. These are congruent. Exactly the same. Same shape and same size. Okay? So that means that all the corresponding, I'll explain this, angles are congruent. Corresponding means angles that match up. For instance, angle 1 and angle 1, these angles match up and they're congruent. This angle is the same as this angle. These are congruent and they're corresponding. They match. Okay? Corresponding sides are congruent. Okay? So this side has the same length as this side. This side has the same length as this side. This side has the same length as this side. All the corresponding angles and corresponding sides are congruent. Okay, let me erase. Okay, if polygons are congruent, then all corresponding parts are congruent. So if I tell you that 2 polygons are congruent, we know all the corresponding parts are congruent, which means the angles and the sides. Okay, I'll show you what I mean. I tell you that triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF. When we're saying that, A, B, C, D, E, F, that means the angle A matches up to angle D and they're congruent. Angle B matches up with angle E and those angles are congruent. Angle C matches up with angle F, and they are congruent. It means all the matching sides are congruent. Sides are congruent, sides are congruent, sides are congruent. So when we say if they're exactly the same, right, like this triangle is congruent to the purple, the red and purple triangles are congruent. They slide over each other, they match up perfectly. All the matching angles are congruent, right? And all the matching sides are congruent. So one mark means the angles are congruent. 2 marks, the angles are congruent. 3 goes to 3. This side goes with this side, so they're marked congruent. These are congruent, and these sides are congruent. Okay, all the matching corresponding sides, all the matching corresponding angles. So if I tell you they're congruent, you know the corresponding parts are congruent. That's what this means. If I tell you all the corresponding parts are congruent, then we know the polygons are congruent. Okay? So if I give you a picture and say, are the polygons congruent, you have to look and see if there's enough information. Okay, so let's do this. Okay? Okay, and I'm going to tell you these angles are congruent, these angles are congruent, and these angles are congruent. Do I have enough information? Are the triangles congruent? Is there enough information there? I've got 1 pair of angles, 2 pair of angles, 3 pair of angles. So angles, yep, angles, good. 3 pairs are congruent. Okay, but what about the sides? I've got 2 marks, so these 2 sides are congruent, right? Here and here. I've got this mark and this mark, that's 2 more pair of sides. I need to have all 3 sides. Do you see how these triangles share this side? So that means this side is the same length for this left triangle, and it's the same length for the right triangle, the right side triangle. Let's demonstrate what I mean by that. If I have this, you're going to have to ignore the marks on it, okay? If these 2 triangles right here, if they share this shared side right here, they're sharing the side from here all the way down to here. They share that side. So when I split them, that has to be the same length for both of them, right? Because they share this side, it has to be the same for both. That's what we're talking about right here. These 2 triangles, if I split them, this length also is shared side, which is congruent. So yes, I've got 1, 2, 3 pairs of sides, 1, 2, 3 pairs of angles. So all the corresponding sides, all the corresponding angles are congruent. That means then, if the corresponding parts are congruent, then the polygons are congruent. So are they congruent? Yes, they are. Okay, now congruent statement. I've done this, but you didn't know that's what it's called. When I say 2 shapes are congruent, this is called a congruence statement. So when I write a congruent statement, the order in how it's written is very important. I'm writing triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF. I think it's easier to write them under each other so you can see them better, okay? And I'm going to do that just because. Usually it's going to be written, okay, left to right, laterally, but I'm going to write it under so I could see how everything matches up. Okay? How I write this determines how I state the congruences. because it says triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF, this means, okay, angle A and angle D are congruent. It means angle B and angle E, how they match up, are congruent. And then angle C and angle F are congruent. Okay? It also means that side AB is congruent to side DE. So I'm taking the first two letters. It means side BC is congruent to, you guys fill it in, and side AC is congruent to, you guys fill it in. BC is the last two letters. So you should be writing EF. AC, first and last. Okay. So when you write the statement, you have to be sure you match them. So if I give you this, there's 3 marks here, okay? So when I write this, I have to be sure I write it so that it's correct. Okay. So I've got A, B, C, D, E, C. I've got 2 triangles. I'm going to say, I could see that 3 sides, I've got 1 marks, right? This side congruent to each other. These sides are congruent to each other. These sides are congruent. This angle is congruent. Second pair of angles are congruent. Third pair of angles are congruent. So by my definition of congruent, all the parts are congruent. So we said, if the corresponding parts are congruent, then the polygons are congruent. So I know these are congruent. But now I'm going to write the statement. Okay, so I'm going to say triangle ABC. I could say triangle BCA. I could say triangle ACB. I'm just going triangle ABC. I'm just naming this triangle. And the order it's okay what order you use. The important part is that these match up correctly. So triangle ABC is congruent to triangle. What angle does angle A have to correspond with? This has got 3 marks. This one has 3 marks, so A has to go with E. What angle does angle B correspond with in this triangle on this side? So B has 2 marks. D has 2 marks. And then C has 1 with 1. So we're saying triangle ABC is congruent to triangle EDC. And I think you guys can see that if you flipped them back over, right? From left side, this right side, these triangles are flipped, okay? Okay, third angle theorem. This one I think makes sense. I'm going to use 2 triangles. Okay. If 2 angles, okay, of one triangle are congruent to 2 angles of another triangle, then these third angles have to be congruent. If 2 angles of one triangle are congruent to 2 angles of another triangle, then the third pair of angles are congruent. I don't know if the purple will show. So if one pair of angles are congruent and two pair of angles are congruent, that means that these up here are also going to be congruent. Let's show. Okay, let's do this again. Okay. If I tell you this is 40 degrees, and this one's 40 degrees. And I tell you this one's 85 degrees, and this one's 85 degrees, right? So I've got two pairs of angles that are congruent. One pair, we'll call this triangle cat, this triangle dog. I'm telling you angle C is congruent, or the measure of angle C is equal to the measure of angle D. They're both 40. I'm telling you that the measure of angle T, I'm putting 2 marks with 2 marks. These two triangles are congruent. Measure of angle T is equal to the measure of angle G. They're both 85. Now if I add these up, I've got 40 and 85. 125, 180 minus 125 is 55. This angle here has to be 55. 40 and 80, subtract from 180. This one also has to be 55. I know the golden rule is 180 for a triangle. Because 180 is my golden rule, whenever I subtract the same amounts, what is left over is always going to be equal to each other. So when two pairs of angles are congruent, then this third angle, angle A, has to be congruent to angle O. Okay? Okay, that's it. You guys try. I have some work on the back. See what you can do. And thanks.